have this thing that I call my 1,000 keystroke rule, is that one keystroke fine, right? But if you repeat that operation enough where it becomes 1,000 keystrokes a day, that 1,000 keystroke, that's 1 to 2 seconds per keystroke. That's 2,000 seconds, right? Added up across your organization. Those kinds of things are on the execution side where we lose ROI. We leak ROI all over the place unless you're tending to that execution problem first.
Let's talk about, Marsh, you talk about being 85-0 on your project.
79-0.
79-0.
79-0.
And WMS implementations are high risk. I always call them heart surgery.
Yeah.
What is the secret to a successful project?
Well, I mean, it's easy to say something, off the cuff like focus, but it's, I think it's a matter of a couple things. Obviously, people take on a WMS for two discrete reasons in my book. One is execute, right? They have some kind of execution requirements now, but I think the bigger play in the longer term is a WMS, a good WMS or a good warehouse solution is a platform for continuous improvement. And so I think what happens is people try to find a balance between those two things, and they get a little lost. So the first thing that in my book you have to concentrate on is execution. Get that execution in place and focus on ROI. And we talk about this a lot where we say, hey, we want to optimize each one of those flows. I think what happens is people are trying to get this thing slammed in because they consider it, this platform for continuous improvement, but they're not focusing enough on ROI and the smaller picture things. So I think that what happens is a little blurriness in a job, and you just have to be laser focused on the objectives that ops brings to you, which is starting with execution, but then leaving the door open because it is a platform for continuous improvement, right? Leaving the door open so that you're also attending to that. And I think that's where people get a little lost. They get a little lost from just the pure execution side. They get very lost on the ROI side of things. And so that's really where it comes down to. And then it's just the project team executing against that focus. So to me, that's where I've always sort of, looked at this, those two phases, and make sure that I'm attending to that long-term platform as, platform of continuous improvement, but really focusing first on, the operational execution side of things and attending to those ROI things. And those ROI things are lost in little ways. Like, oh, that's all right, we'll do this extra keystroke here. Or, oh, it's okay, we got to do this few extra scans here. And we used to have this thing that I called my 1,000 keystroke rule, is that one keystroke fine, right? But if you repeat that operation enough where it becomes 1,000 keystrokes a day, that 1,000 keystroke, that's 1 to 2 seconds per keystroke. That's 2,000 seconds, right? Added up across your organization. So I think those kinds of things are on the execution side where we lose ROI. We leak ROI all over the place unless you're tending to that execution problem first.
Is it death by 1,000 keystrokes?
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, exactly. Your ROI we often use that term, like we're leaking ROI out of this part of the operation.
Yeah, but you're talking about an operation that, an implementation that actually has gone to the point where you can leak a little bit of ROI. I mean, I think they're even more fraught with danger sometimes than that, right?
Oh yeah,
so
for sure.
We get into these jobs, and you have to have the bare minimum operational expertise between whoever the ops people are, the customer, us. It's a partnership, and there are elements that will make it successful or make it unsuccessful.
Yeah.
You got the political environment, you got all these pieces. The unique thing is that in warehouse systems and logistics systems, unlike most other systems, you have a data representation of a physical world, and that creates an additional dimension of error that you can have.
Yeah, right? And the problem they have
two sides that can move independently sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Shouldn't, but it does.
The problem that we have sometimes on projects is that, like, the managers will very well intentioned don't really know the actual operation as well as they think they do.
Yep.
And so they'll communicate something to us, and then we'll get ready to get the product installed and get it down to the folks that are really doing the work, and they'll say, this is not how we do business, right? And so actually was a genesis of our challenge and refine process, where we would actually get out there in front of people earlier, because we found that with a normal waterfall technique for doing projects, as you're saying, right, there are people that thought they understand the process, or the IT folks were involved, whatever is going on. And then when it got to the person at UAT or whatever, when we were delivering the system, sort of in that waterfall approach where you go off and develop something and then bring it back and present it to them, it was entirely wrong. And then now you're months behind potentially, right? Because you got to rework a bunch of processes through that. And so what we decided to do, this was probably about 2013 or 2014, we came up with this idea. It's to really, again, we call it a respectful challenge process, where we get with the ops folks, but not just the managers, but the people on the floor. And then we say, okay, let's talk about this flow, and let's challenge each other to make sure the flow is right, and get rid of those political elements and say, oh, look, the folks in receiving, they actually know how those trucks come in, and they know the carriers that have problems with safety issues with their trucks and all the rest of the jazz that happens in real life, right? And so then you start to work with them on building these flows, and then we're also challenging them to say, have you thought about this way? Because this might not that our product really, this some people use that opportunity to say this way our product works. So we actually say, look, because we have so many variables in the way we can configure things, we're like, have you thought about this? Because here's like two or three different ways you could do this that might save you some time. And then just working through with them, because people are a little bit, especially if somebody's been doing this for 17 years on the floor, right? They're a little sometimes resistant to change. So you just have to prove it to them. And I think that challenge refine process is all about proving that we can get an operational system in place, right? And it be effective.
Right. And that gets you up to game time, right?
Right.
So that's all about preparation, having a process, really understanding as much as you can, and pulling together, as partners with the customer to say, okay, this is how it's going to go. That gets you up to kickoff.
Yeah.
And then you kick off, and it kind of all hell breaks loose sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Then it becomes how you react, how you go in at halftime and make your adjustments. And
what I always like to say at go live for these things is, like, at a go live, by the time you get to go live, you should have all the answers and no questions, because 10 minutes into the actual go live, there's all kinds of questions, right? There's all kinds of things that may or may not have really been thought through or worked through all the way, or the SOPs might be slightly different than reality. And then yes, you have to be able to react quickly to that. And that's really the key is being nimble. I think what happens sometimes with the WMS teams, and I think our WMS teams tend to be very much participating on the floor, is they're a little bit ivory tower sometimes, the way they approach that is like, we developed this SOP, and here it is, and then we'll stay up in the room and go and execute. And it's very much a little bit of hands off. And I think what's great about our implementation teams is we're down there with you. We're understanding the flows, we're doing that kind of stuff. And I think that's the important part, because then we can get in there and say, okay, we'll make this little tweak here. We'll talk about it with operations, get an approval, and make a quick little change to the SOP and get this moved through quickly, right? And so you just have to be nimble. But the first thing is, going into a go live, you just have, like I said, all answers, no questions. If you have questions into your go live, you're going to get 1,000 more in the first day, and now you're out of luck.
Yeah, and you have to recognize, I think, that the people maybe sometimes that are really good in the phase going up to go live aren't so good after the go live starts.
Yeah.
And it's because the game changes, not to just, make it into a game, but you're preparing, you're planning, you're challenging, you're saying, okay, this is what I believe I know about everything. And then once the operation starts really running, you are going to learn things. And so the people that are really good at planning might not be quite as good at diagnosing, triaging, and then reacting.
Right.
And so you just have to understand who it is, and maybe you listen to different people in that phase. Got to hold Got to hold yourself accountable, hold the customer accountable.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big part is hold yourself accountable. I would always, when we were doing go lives, I would always grade our go lives. Right? I graded every single go live that we ever did. And my guys came back to me at one point, he said, that was like almost a perfect go live and you still gave us a B. And I said, yeah, I've never given anything better than a B. Just because I think of this more as like a journey toward excellence, and I always feel like there's something else we can do. Certainly, we delivered better than anybody could have or whatever, but I still think there's always always the ability to be a little bit better. And I said, just when I say B, just consider it an A if you want to think that way.
There's no grade inflation.
No, I don't grade on a curve, so it's I'm very strict about my grading. But yeah, I think it is about accountability, and I think that's part of the challenge refine process helps us because in the challenge refine process, we're actually asking for input early and often, and so we ask. The thing that we do is we ask the same question over and over again, right? A lot of times because we're asking in slightly different ways because we're really diving into the cracks of like an operation, right? And so if you don't dive into the cracks, it might seem at the veneer like you have the problem solved. At the veneer level, it's, oh, I got the problem solved. Here's how we do receiving. Tick it off. It's got an SOP for it. But if you don't dive into the cracks, you're not finding those exceptions, right? Because most of the time that we have issues that go live, it's not about the straight line flow, right? It's about this one, it's about this one vendor who we have to do this for, or this one inbound kind of type that we have to, unload to a staging lane, and we didn't contemplate that. So unless you're diving into all the cracks and crevices, and that's what that challenge refine process allows us to do. Ask the same question in a myriad of different ways to different people, and then say, okay, we're going to plot this out in the software, get those users to go and use the software to do that, and then sort of give their approval. So they're part of the decision process, not that we're going to deliver something, on some day of the project to them. We are together delivering the end solution, and I think it's a different way of thinking about solving the problem. And we originally did it because it would help us eliminate reworks, but ultimately what it allowed us to do is dramatically tighten up the timeframes because we could, we're delivering with much more confidence. And then when in the ROI world, the company that Softeon acquired my company, we did everything fixed bid just as we do in Softeon, and we have to be cost confident. So you have to be able to say, here's how we're going to deliver it. We're going to deliver on time, and what we're going to deliver is going to meet your operational requirements.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's very true. And the dynamics, how you work with, the customer, you use the word partnership or customer. There just has to be balance.
Yeah,
If you're taking orders, it's going to end badly. If you're giving orders, it's going to end badly.
Right.
So it is that respectful challenge and collaboration and wrestling of what's the right way to go. Yeah. And then common recognition if something's not right. Those exception processes that happen when you go live and I'll put it over there. I'll put it over there. How many times have we gone through an implementation where a week into it, you look at the problem pile.
Yes.
It grows. It grows and takes over the operation because you're over here saying, well, I got 97% of the stuff I can process and get out. I'll worry about that later. You can't do that. At the end of the day, you got to look at it and you got to say, I have to triage this and figure it out because it will just really kind of grow and cause the operation to stop at some point.
At some point, yeah, for certain. I think that's a really terrific point. Because, I think that it does end up being largely around exceptions, but also just, that idea going out to the floor, team members, right? They don't often, a lot of times, they're in a big organization, especially, they don't often get a voice sometimes, right, in the way things, and they're like, we always wanted to do it a little bit differently. And the challenge refine process allows us to hear those comments a little bit more, right? And say, okay, let's talk about that we want to have a different, inbound checkoff list, or we want to have a different, flow for, receiving unserialized product or something like that. And let's talk about those things and giving voice to the folks on the floor, the team members on the floor, really then, gives them some ownership, right? Because they've helped shape the system, right? And so it does, to your point about a partnership, it gets us all working really down to the floor level at a partnership level. Like those people, the team members on the floor really have been working with us and we know them, right? As opposed to we're delivering a system and we got to go down and introduce that to them.
Yeah, so WMS people know that WMS is a different animal.
That is true.
And doesn't adhere to a project methodology. So your creation of the experience and your creation of Challenge Refine is really a reflection of that experience, right? That to lower risk and
right. It was, we were at Get Us ROI, our business was 100% doing implementations. And so, I think, like I said, I'd never given us better than a B. And when I would go through and we'd grade each go live, we'd say, hey, what did we miss here? What and why did we miss it? And what caused us to get a C or something like that if we missed an integration or if we missed, we had one site where it was sort of like that Mars mission where they were like, oh, we did the calculations from metric to English measurements wrong or whatever, and pew, so the customer said, okay, we're going to send down the weights, and they said, okay, great. And they sent them, in one UOM, and we processed them, and the other, we were blowing up people's transportation systems and stuff like that. And so, just small things like that can be really meaningful. Like we blew up somebody's transportation system, not literally, figuratively, because we were calculating, the weight of a trailer at like 26 million pounds or something like that. And so those level of conversations really are important. And, over and over again, kind of doing that. And so it is a different animal and it's got a lot of moving pieces to it. Right. And that was really bad, actually. That one of those situations where we should have caught that, right? And so we started to have those conversations about having deeper conversations with the ops folks, with the IT folks that are responsible for integrations. Each one of those things are opportunities for a challenge process or for a deeper conversation about what do you mean by weight, and just, what are your objectives? What are you trying to do here? Tell us your problem that you're trying to solve, and let us, maybe we can help you with the integration a little differently because we have different techniques for doing that. So there's a lot of conversations along the way that help, and in that challenge process.
Yeah, I think in the end, WMS it's a big, complex business application with the added dimension of the physical world that it represents. So you're right. WMS people understand that. When you get into a project and you don't have any WMS people, like maybe on the customer side of the team, it's a challenge, and you have to be able to augment that. Otherwise, it makes it really difficult, slow going.
Yeah, I think that you're right. The best implementations that we've ever had is when we have great representation from IT and from ops, but also a WMS team that knows the objectives in the customer's side of things, that knows the objectives. Doesn't necessarily maybe know everything about a WMS because that's what we're paid to do, but knows enough to say, okay, here's the decisions that need to be made and are part of the project plan, and can take on ownership of certain elements of the SOPs, or the best thing is if they can help us with the SOPs and things like that, because they're helping mapping out the processes and things like that.
It's a hard world, right? I mean, if you're in an IT role, you're not usually clamoring to go get assigned to a WMS because they kind of run 2 shifts, 3 shifts, weekends, whatever it is. It's it's not as confined as a business application that you have to support or something.
Yeah, and our IT brothers and sisters over there are already overstacked with a million things, and then having this WMS project is already just like another thing on their back that they have to carry, right? Yeah. And so it's I totally feel for them. They got the IT staff has really largely been crunched, and they got a gazillion responsibilities, and this is a lot of times just another thing. And so that's why carving out a separate WMS team, out of that IT group or something like that, a combination of IT and ops, really for the customers that have done that. And, we have good examples of that where they've sort of carved out like an execution group, right? There's a WMS side of things, and it's kind of a combination of like IT folks and ops-centric, folks that can do configuration and things like that. That's been really the most successful combination that we've seen, and we've seen it over and over again. And it doesn't always have to be a big organization, because it's sometimes the WMS person is like, they got one or two people in the IT group, right, that are good at doing execution stuff, or want to get involved on the floor and stuff like that. It doesn't take a huge amount, but even just one or two people that are in that group really help a lot.
Yeah. Seems like at this point in our careers, you should almost be able to take the composition of the teams, their experience, their backgrounds, put it in through a predictive AI thing and go, yeah, this project will be great success, or this
you could almost do that, really, because you're right.
It's pattern recognition.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you're right.
So let's finish on this thought. Give me your biggest project scar. I know you guys have lots of scars. Something that you'll never do again.
Yeah, that was really just about having a transition plan to an internal staff. So early in the career, doing a system, one of the early systems for compact computer, and we created a pretty complicated waving process that would generate all the orders and kind of put them to all the different areas of the facility, try to coordinate, get them all down to the shipping dock at the same time. And well, yours truly was the one that really understood how that worked. And to kind of use that same analogy, you could play that piano about waving and finding the right kind of batch orders to wave. And this was early days. And so what that created was a situation where I just was there running the operation, 7x24. And if I wasn't there, they'd given me one of the early generation luggable laptop things.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a clamshell that opened like this.
No.
It was a gigantic box with a keyboard that snapped.
Yeah, you ever see like you get on a plane and the person has like way too big of a backpack to fit in the overhead? That's exactly.
So I carried that around with its modem capabilities and would dial in from wherever I was. I was strapped to that for 6-9 months. It was a long road until basically got the technology enveloped in some additional kind of UI capabilities that made it more simple and got people trained up on how to diagnose it and operate it. That was a battle scar.
So you didn't plan. I mean, you didn't plan to have it that way. It was just like a realization that, okay, I'm the only guy that knows how to do this. So for a period of time, you were it.
Yeah, I was it. So that wasn't the plan, but the plan was to kind of get to that next level of capability or efficiency with the waving process. And we did do that. I mean, but it's complicated.
Yeah.
And when it got complicated, you could try to generate a wave and it would churn away for 20 minutes or 30 minutes and spit out like 2 picks.
Yeah.
And there was very little visibility into the engine. And that was the flaw. And so it took a long time to get all of the visibility into the engine out to other people that could then really consume it. Yeah. So it wasn't the plan. Created something that was complicated. And yeah, I lived with it for many months.
Yeah.
Because I was either going to live with it or they were going to pick.
Yeah.
The orders were going to come out.
Yeah, but you had a nice condo down there.
Yes, I did.
That was nice on the beach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you did good.
Well, no, that was Danka. That was in Compact.
Oh, yeah, you were talking about Compact. Oh, yeah, Compact.
That was Compact.
Compact.
That was in Houston.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, then.
That was when we stayed at the Sofitel, and it was so humid that it would rain in the atrium inside the building.
That was gnarly because like there was like mold in your room and stuff like that. It was gnarly. That was a gnarly hotel. But they gave you that baguette when you left, right? You get thanks for staying. You're at a moldy room, but they give you a baguette when you check out. Yeah, and you put it in your backpack, or whatever for your carry-on. Why are you carrying his giant baguette trying to get on a plane? Well, I don't know. They gave it to me in the hotel. I feel like I have to do something with it. Yeah.
I lived there so long and rented a car from National so long that they called me and said, "Did you steal this car?" Because I had it like 17 weeks in a row.
This car that was like Cadillac.
It was a big Cadillac. Yeah. I said, "No, I just
There was
parked at the airport."
do you still have our car?
Yeah. So you got to bring it back. I said, "I'm not bringing it back. It's a nice car." They said, "We'll give you a different one." I said, "Okay, I'm trusting you."
I did the same thing. I was at across the street at the Marriott doing compact. I did Jim did the distribution side. I did the manufacturing side, and so we were both down there, and I never checked out. I just stayed, I would take the shuttle to the airport when I went home, and I would just leave my stuff there in the car in the parking lot and stuff. But I think my biggest thing was, remember that Panasonic go live?
Yeah.
That was tough. That was a VAR, so one of our VARs did that. And that was a tough site because it was a really automated site, had a conveyor sortation system, had carousels because it was the 90s and everybody did carousels in the 90s. Remember, everybody and their brother had carousels in the 90s. And then it had a consolidation carousel, and then it had pack stations, and it was a complicated solution. And then Panasonic, because this was for Panasonic parts, they had like every part for everything that they ever made, right? So they had like 200,000 parts in that crammed into those carousels. They had those little pieces of paper that you would write your telephone number on and put in the telephone, like like your grandmother used to do. You write this little, and then that was a part number that they sold. I remember, I'm like, what the hell is this? This is the little piece of paper that you put in the little thing in your telephone that has your telephone, like as if you like. Why do you have to have your number? That's your telephone number. Like on your phone. But yeah, so that was hard because the VAR, well-intended though they were, had no ability to execute. And so remember, we had to go in and save that like at the last minute. We had to do all the sortation stuff. We had to do all the carousel stuff, which by the way turned out awesome. But just the trying to save that job at the last minute. Again, it comes down to having a good project management function and understanding, the requirements, and then just building a realistic plan. I mean, realistic plans never include a little box on your plan that says, and then a miracle happens. So, I think that's what their approach was, right? And so we had to go in there and save it. I remember you coming down there because you were doing Cardinal Health nearby or something like that. And you're like, Mark, you have to leave now, because I was literally falling asleep, while he was talking to me. And Jim's like, you have to leave and get some sleep. But yeah, we pulled that one out. But I mean, that was one of those situations where, the VAR, again, well-intentioned as they were, that was a hard site. It had so much stuff going on it, and a trillion parts, and God, they had bikes. Like I never knew Panasonic had bikes, but for everything that they sold, they had some kind of part for, right? So they had bikes up there, they had giant computer screens, and they did monster displays for stadiums. So we had these big, huge display boards that we actually had to have a special crane to move down to those little things that you cram in the little thing in your telephone, the little gap there that shows you. So you had this crazy ass stuff going on. And they just weren't prepared for it, but we did pull it out. But I missed that gathering, and we sent all our guys back for this special gathering that we had, and I took a bullet for the team, and I said, okay, I'll just stay. Yeah. And so we had something planned, a corporate outing to like some resort kind of thing, right? Yep. And so we sent everybody back, and then I stayed that weekend to make sure the site stayed up.
Yeah, that might have been the horse riding incident.
That was the horse riding.
Yeah, well, we won't talk about that. But the question about implementations is, yeah, they can really get tough, and you got to be willing. I guess ultimately you got to be willing to take responsibility and step in and do what it does. Do what needs to be done to keep it on the rails. Yeah, because otherwise, sometimes nobody really wants to keep it on the rails.
No, and I think it's important, like, to add things like what we've been doing lately, the last few years, is adding things like volume testing. Because one of the things about go lives is, like, you can't get behind. Getting behind is the death knell, right? Because you get behind today, you're further behind tomorrow and further behind, and that's just it's a death march at that point. So, as we've done more things, we've recognized the things that'll kill us right at go live is that not being able to handle volume, right, with the servers or things like that. So adding those kinds of things from a discipline perspective really helps a lot. And a lot of that is part of the challenge process to say, we're challenging our own setups, we're challenging the server configurations, we're challenging everything about it, right, to make sure we can deliver.
But it's a much higher success rate now than,
Oh my gosh.
10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Oh, I mean,
In the early days, it was like, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't.
Yeah, I mean, it was back to this, man. We were pioneers. We were pioneers, and we were doing things like coding receiving on the receiving dock, and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I mean, not only, I think the process, which especially, using our challenge refine process, getting a mature approach to understanding the things that can go wrong, because that's essentially what the challenge refine process is doing, is saying, look, how can we deliver a system that executes, right? Because and then what are the things that are going to fail? And the main thing that's going to fail is for us not to know something, right? If we don't know something, again, you go into go live, all the answers, no questions. And in order to feel confident about that is dive into those cracks and crevices of things. And that is, along with, the fact that like in our software, so much can be done through configuration. Once we get the configuration, it's not like you're coding anything, right? So you can get that materialized into a config that works and then can be validated and challenged by our folks really rapidly.
Yeah, yeah. I think good controls, good housekeeping.
Yep.
So there was and it still exists today, right? Whether you move things into a UAT or you have a kind of a sandbox, then into a UAT and then into a production, you have to have very good processes and technologies that move those things atomically all together. You're not missing pieces. It's something that, that problem has changed over time. So 20 years ago, it was about what you compiled and what pieces of code you had where, and now it's about what pieces of configuration
exactly.
but you still have to have that be very tight.
Yeah, you have to think about it like it's a controlled, element, almost like we did in the days of code, right? So, because the configs are so important, and I think that having a configuration master, a person that is, doing that, if your project is small enough, you're going to have a person that's doing that and managing that. But the important thing is that the configs are never. And people are really well intended on this. They'll go in and say, well, they get something into UAT and like, oh, it's not quite right. And then they do a little config change there. And then that doesn't get into prod, right? And so I know they're well intended. They have good intentions, but that's a bad process. And I think that's part of, what the maturity of things. You've got to back that into your lower level environments and then push that up through. Otherwise you lose that, or have the, possibility of losing that configuration once it goes to prod. So you're exactly right.
Yeah, so people don't talk about it enough, configuration management and all the controls around it. And
Exactly.
you still have to recognize it's a multi-system kind of collaboration with host systems or whatever. So
Different customers. Right?
It's never going to be automatic. It's never going to be 100% automatic. It's going to take that kind of coordination.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have a really good ability to do that with our ability to do copies and things like that across configurations, copy configurations and things like that. But it's still, again, to your point, discipline about moving the configurations along the, the project spectrum to make sure that those things atomically are moving along correctly.
So in the spirit of Malcolm Gladwell's kind of 10,000 hours to become an expert, like, can you do a rough calculation between the two of you, how many hours you have on projects?
Well, yeah.
Well, you have more than I do.
Yeah.
So it was funny because this is really good. So we were doing some implementation work for another company, and they would always ask us for resumes and stuff like that for who's going to be on it. I would always be sort of the SME, so the subject matter expert on automation system. And the question was, how many hours did you have doing this kind of work? And I said, I think I put down 50,000. and they echoed this back to me, and they said, "Did you mean 5,000?" I said, "No, unfortunately, I do mean 50,000 hours of doing this kind of work," and which is now up to about 60,000 hours. But yeah, so that's the level of work that we've been doing. The thing for me, the good thing for me is doing WMS design is also my hobby, in addition to, because I'll sit out and, my kids and my wife know that, I've got my little pad with me and I'm designing something, and I do that for relaxation. I know it's golf. No, I'm a surfer and a snowboarder and a WMS designer. So
In your spare time.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, yeah, it's sometimes you look at your career and you think, what an odd thing to get into. Like back in the day, we'd say, okay, we do automated warehousing, and people go, yeah, whatever. And it wasn't until Amazon came along and made it sound cool. Now we're all of a sudden cool. Yeah, cool. We're like, we're cool because, but yeah, I mean, that's really been, for me, doing architectural design and stuff like that is really as much of a hobby as it is, not a hobby, but I mean, it's just, what I do just in my spare time.
And look at me, I kind of was in that career up till a point in time, and then like jumped out and did payroll systems and timekeeping systems and planning systems and all those kinds of things. And then, this opportunity came up, and I said, ooh, I got to go back into that crazy house, because WMS and logistics is just something really unique.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this with my wife, and she's the most supportive person ever. I mean, but she's asked, do I ever feel like I'm going to retire? And I'm like, why would I? This is what I love this, right? It's always changing, and it's exciting, technology wise. I mean, I geek, so I consider it exciting. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's always challenging and it's always needed, and there's always some new thing that's coming along, and it's I just thank my lucky stars back in the day when I sat there at whatever the country club was that McHugh used to always take us for interviews. Remember that place? And then I was sitting there with McHugh and Durheim and then Joe Ziegler and doing that interview, and they were like, offer me the job and to come work with you again, right? And so I thank my lucky stars, because it changed everything in my life, really, and it allowed us to do things where we created that architecture and changed the game of everything in our field for 20 years, and now we get to do it again.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember now. So you hired me once, and then I got you over to McHugh and dragged you over here. So you owe me one.
Yeah, nice.
2 in 1.
Yeah, exactly.